And I'm telling you,
you haven't read the Constitution?
I've
It
got
says
it right,
all persons.
I've got it right here, but what you're saying is that every single one of the illegals that was sent down to El Salvador is supposed to be given due process pursuant.
Yeah, that's what the Constitution says. It says no person.
Say that.
What you just saw was not a slip of the tongue. That was the director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the top law enforcement officer in the United States, telling a sitting United States senator that he does not know whether the Constitution protects people from being seized off the street and imprisoned in a foreign country without a trial. We are not talking about a technicality. We are talking about due process. 2 words. The foundation of every protection you have ever had against the unchecked power of your own government. If you or I had said that in a courtroom, our credibility would be finished. Patel said it under oath before the United States Senate. Stay with us. Because before this hearing ends, a senator is going to hold up the actual Constitution and read it out loud to the FBI director, and Patel's response is going to tell you everything you need to know about who this system is actually designed to protect. Hit subscribe before you watch this. Once you see what happens next, you will want to see everything we cover from here.
So as I understood it, you testified yesterday that you'd like to have another $1 billion added on to the FY25 level to do the additional work you'd like to do on drug interdiction, fentanyl in general, and anti-terrorism. And today you gave us a budget that requests cutting $500 million. Which is it? Do you want us to, what are you asking of this committee? To add funds, add $1 billion, or to cut $500 million?
Thank you, Senator. Appreciate the opportunity. What I'm asking for is that with more, I can simply do more. And I was giving examples of what more I could do. I can do the mission and am in support of the budget here. And I'm working with appropriators and you to fill the gaps.
So you support the budget presented that cuts $500 million, but you also support us adding $1 billion should we choose to do that?
Well, I can't not support the budget as proposed because then I would be supporting no budget.
Okay. Well, we've got those 2 options. We do look forward to further details from you about how you plan to modify the function of FBI on these different missions that you've highlighted today so that we can give it the appropriate consideration.
Before we get to the explosion, we need to understand the setup. Merkley just caught Patel in a direct budget contradiction. $1 billion more yesterday, $500 million less today. No straight answer under direct questioning. That pattern matters. Because it is the same pattern we are about to watch play out on something far more consequential than a budget line. The Fifth Amendment is not a complicated document. It says, no person shall be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. No person, not no citizen. Every person within the jurisdiction of the United States. The Supreme Court confirmed this in Miranda v. Arizona, confirmed it again in Reno v. Flores. So watch what happens when a senator asks the FBI director a question that already has a settled legal answer. Watch how many words it takes Patel to not give it.
Director Patel, you're familiar with the Fifth Amendment.
Yes, Senator.
And it is really the freedom clause of the United States. It was 4 years into being a nation when Congress and the states said, hey, we have to make sure that there's not an over-aggressive government in the future that deprives us of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. And you're familiar that that applies to all persons in the United States.
Yes, Senator.
So there's been a lot of concern about the several hundred immigrants who were swept off the streets of America and sent to El Salvador without due process. And does that concern you?
Senator, I'm not in a position to comment on whether or not they were given or not given due process or are supposed to be afforded due process. All the FBI did and all the FBI will continue to do is arrest those that have violated the law.
Okay, but to arrest, you have to investigate. Have you launched an investigation of this violation of the Freedom Clause of the U.S. Constitution?
Senator, I don't know that I agree with your characterization.
Well, that was my first question, whether or not you agree with the Fifth Amendment and are prepared to defend it. It is your job to investigate crimes.
Yes, I agree with the Fifth Amendment. I agree with the entire Constitution, and the men and women at the FBI decide.
So are you going to launch an investigation of the reported violation of the due process of several hundred individuals?
Again, Senator, it's not for me to call the balls and strikes on it. The men and women at the FBI who are trained to open investigations will make those calls.
He is not being asked to be a scholar. He is being asked to do his job. Kash Patel passed the bar. He clerked, prosecuted, and defended cases in federal court. He swore an oath to uphold and defend the Constitution. And he just told the United States Senate he cannot confirm whether that document applies to people who were arrested, loaded onto planes, and imprisoned in a foreign country with no hearing, no lawyer, and no judge. Here is what the record shows outside this room. One of those people had a name, Kilmar Abrego Garcia, a Maryland man, a husband, a father of 3, granted legal protection by a federal immigration judge in 2019, specifically shielded from removal to El Salvador. In March of 2025, he was deported there anyway, sent to CCOT, one of the most dangerous prisons in the Western Hemisphere. The Trump administration admitted in court filings it was an error. The Supreme Court ruled 9-0 that the government must facilitate his return. Every single justice, unanimous. The administration defied that ruling for months. And now, Kash Patel sits before the Senate and says it is not for him to call the balls and strikes. If you or I refused a direct court order for months while someone sat in a foreign prison by mistake, we would not be sitting in a Senate hearing. We would be sitting in a cell. What happens next in this room is the closest thing to accountability we are going to see today.
So you have no influence over whether an investigation is opened?
I have influence over it, but you're asking me a constitutional question. I'm not a constitutional scholar.
Well, it's actually not it's a question also of law.
But your position is that every one of those individuals is by constitutional right afforded due process. I don't know the answer to that. I'm telling you.
You haven't read the Constitution? It says all persons.
I've got it right here, but what you're saying is that every single one of the illegals that was sent down to El Salvador is supposed to be given due process pursuant.
Yeah, that's what the Constitution says. It says no person.
It doesn't say that.
It does say no person. Yeah, I'll encourage you to read it because it's also been affirmed by the Supreme Court repeatedly. On the case of Miranda versus Arizona, held the right of all individuals, regardless of citizenship status. The Supreme Court in Reno versus Flores. I mean, but it's the plain language of the Constitution. It concerns me that you're not familiar with the core concept of due process applying to all persons as written in black and white in the Constitution.
As the first public defender who's ever served at the FBI as its director, I am more aware of due process than any predecessor in my seat. You are delineating between removal proceedings and criminal acts. My job is to investigate criminal acts. That's what we do.
You are aware that the Fifth Amendment refers to taking away liberty, and when people are arrested on the street, detained and sent out of the country, that their liberty has been taken away.
Senator, that is a constitutional question that you are asking me to answer. It's not for me to answer.
The question has already been answered by the Supreme Court that they're protected, therefore it's a violation of law, and it's your responsibility to open an investigation, and you're saying today you will not do so?
I am not the agency involved in removal proceedings. That is a different branch of government.
So if an agency other than the FBI violates the law and the Constitution, you will not investigate because it's a different agency?
I will investigate every violation of law.
Well, you have, but you just said you're not investigating.
No. You and I are in disagreement on what is a violation of law. I have yet to hear from the Supreme Court your position as you have adjudicated it.
Well, very, very interesting, because the Supreme Court's been very clear, and I had heard you were trained in the law, so I expected maybe you would try to uphold it. You also took an oath to the Constitution.
Patel just told Merkley they disagree on what constitutes a violation of law. The director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, disagreeing with the plain text of the Fifth Amendment, on the record, under oath. Merkley has one question left. It is not a complicated question, but the answer Patel gives will be the only thing standing between what just happened in this hearing and any accountability at all. Watch closely.
Thank you for the reminder.
Well, it's important to remind you, since you're apparently unfamiliar with the very basics of the core protection of freedom in our Constitution.
What I am familiar with is protecting the American public, and that's what
Let me close with one question, Mr. Chairman. Will you make sure that due process in every action of the FBI is completely honored under your time as director?
will I ensure that due process is followed?
Yes.
Under the Constitution?
Completely. Send that message throughout the FBI that due process must be followed, is constitutionally required. Make sure that it's done under your direction.
Sure.
Great. Thank you.
Sure, that was the word, one word, from the Director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. After being reminded he swore an oath to the Constitution, he spent this entire hearing failing to confirm applies to everyone. Sure, here is what the record shows beyond this room and beyond this hearing. The FBI Agents Association, the professional organization representing the men and women who actually work at the Bureau, sent a formal letter to Congress warning that Patel was making personnel decisions without providing due process protections to terminated agents. The people charged with enforcing the law were being denied the same protection Patel could not confirm applies to the rest of us. Meanwhile, the Supreme Court ruled 9-0 that the government must facilitate the return of Kilmar Abrego Garcia. A unanimous court, the administration defied that ruling for months before returning him, then immediately arrested him on new charges. As of today, his legal situation remains unresolved. The pattern is not complicated. Due process is applied when the government chooses to apply it. And the man who leads the nation's top investigative agency testified under oath that he cannot confirm it applies at all. Merkley forced a commitment onto the record. Patel said yes, completely. That commitment now exists in the congressional record. Every FBI action going forward can be measured against it. The question is whether a promise extracted under pressure in a hearing room means anything when the cameras turn off. Whether the oath matters more than the sure, whether the Constitution Merkley held up in that chamber still means what it says. Should Congress subpoena the FBI's internal directives on due process and immigration enforcement to verify compliance? Or do we wait for the next name, the next family, the next admission of error? Drop your answer below. Due process does not protect itself.